Hello, welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on March the 22nd, 2016. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walt and Jack show, but Walt isn't here today. So Mazin Al Nahawi is filling in. Before we start, I just want to read something, which is this. At the beginning of last week's program, and maybe today's show as well, I'm not sure, Shaw TV added in some comments about something I said back in November of last year. And I just want to make it clear that the comments that Shaw is making are their comments, not mine. So once again, the comments that may be at the beginning of this show and were at the beginning of last week's show are Shaw's comments, not mine. So Mazin, thanks for filling in. And we're going to start by talking about something that you're looking into, which is the bombing by the RCMP and maybe John Nuttall and Amanda Korody, the bombing of the legislature on July 1st, 2013. Mm-hmm. So you're looking into that. Have you had any?
We're still gathering information, everything. We are waiting to get the script of and the record of the court, but also one of the things which it should be actually in a few days, starting our first freedom information request for both departments related to the issue, the RCMP and CSIS. Just to start with a simple question about the whole story from the beginning. As we mentioned last time, now the lawyer are looking on the involvement of CSIS in the issue, especially that there could be a big possibility that one of human resource of CSIS was working on radicalizing John Nuttall. So in that case, it's become, again, as I mentioned last time, it's very convenient when we have all that propaganda about Muslim, and now we have Belgium story. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, and you know, before we go to that, just what I see as the deliberate creation of fear, anger towards Canadians who are also Muslims. The deliberate doing of that creation of fear and division by our media, by telling us a story really ever since 9/11 and before, so we're talking 15 years, of a story in which they never really tell us the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's always a story designed, I think, to create fear and division. And of course the media is owned by the corporations, and I guess, I mean, to my way of looking at the world, the corporations want fear, anger, and division, because divide and conquer is as old as the hills, and as long as we are divided and fighting each other, and maybe even involved in foreign wars, which they also do to us, then nobody's looking at the real enemy, which I think is the corporation itself.
And there's an important issue here nobody talking about. It's the trend, the exact similar story happening, and especially down south in the US, doing exact kind of tactic, preying on mentally ill people to, in the end, they end up as a terrorist radical. As I mentioned also, the Vancouver Sun, one of the newspaper talking about, but there is that idea that it's a farce or there's a comedy here, and I agree there is some element of comedy. I am a critic in theater,
Right.
But the problem
when the Vancouver Sun was writing about the Korody and Nuttall case.
Yes, especially when you hear about the dialogue happening between Amanda and John. They are both, as we mentioned, mentally ill. They are also on drugs. They are really just waiting to get their drugs and certain issue in their mind, and they cannot really focus on one issue. But yes, there is an element of comedy here, but the problem it's the tragedy here, how many lines were broken just to end up in the end having that threat known to public. There was again how the RCMP, the representation of the Arab businessman, a lot of stereotype being used, a lot of, and nobody talking about how this was done. Everybody talking about the ultimate, the end, the outcome.
And I mean, the way I see it is that the Harper government and the RCMP and CSIS conspired, and the media, because for the most part the media played this story straight, conspired to create kind of a terrorist incident where no terrorist incident would ever have happened without the RCMP and CSIS and the Harper government being involved, and then using that story to spread a negative feeling about Muslim people and also to create fear and anger. If that's what our government and our security forces and national police force are up to in this country of ours, then, I mean, then we are really down the rabbit hole a long, long way, and everything has got to be questioned, and everything, we have got to focus on making very major changes. And it comes down to, we've got to build a free press, and we've got to replace our governments with governments that actually are democratic and work for the people. If our governments are involved in this kind of manipulation of us, and then we go right to what's happening in Brussels, Belgium today, what I immediately thought was possibly a false flag attack. We don't know, but it's got to be investigated, because these things are never investigated. They happen. We're fed a line by the security forces and the politicians and the media about ISIS and terror and Muslims and everything else, and then the news moves somewhere else. But we know that the CIA and NATO have done this before. They have gone around Europe and they have committed assassinations, murders, and bombings in which people have been killed, and they have done it to destabilize left-wing and central governments in Europe and support right-wing governments. And that's where we are in Europe right now.
You're talking about the Gladio operation. I wish if when we talk about terrorism, to talk about the real terrorism. The real terrorism happening in Iraq, the real terrorism happening in Libya, the real terrorism happening in Yemen, the real terrorism happening in Syria. And the real terrorists, their headquarters, actually, I can say it simply, it's in Washington, D.C. They opened that box of creating these Islamist radical when we had the war on communism before. They financed them, they built the whole infrastructure for them to move them around from Afghanistan to Chechnya to Bosnia, everywhere. And after that, they come and blame them about it. They are their creation. So again, if you want to talk about real terrorism, let's see what happened to the Iraqi family. They lost their future, their present, they lost their neighbors, they lost their life, they lost everything. And we never talk about them like a normal human being, like anybody else. One victim or 100,000 victims, it's a problem. But when we focus all the time on issue like what happened in Paris and Belgium, and we forget that this is the typical day life happening everywhere in the East Mediterranean and in Libya. Just look at Libya. Libya used to be one of the most prosperous countries in Africa. Muammar Gaddafi, never mind what they tell you about, he built a man-made river. Cost him $33 billion. He did not borrow anything. From their own money, they built everything. One of the first things were bombed in that campaign, that river was bombed. They are really going after these dictatorship which they dealt with them before. Why they don't go after him directly? Why they go in the infrastructure of that country, destroying everything was built there, bring them back to Stone Age? One of the issue, by the way, Libya tried to make the African Union separate from the use of dollar. Again, here, whenever you try to get away from the American imperialist plan and or their market style, then they are going to bring you democracy to your country.
Yes. Yes, at the point of a fighter jet.
Yes, by bombing you, by bombing everything you have.
I agree that really the center of terror in the world today lies, I guess, in Washington, D.C. and the people who control Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is just the politicians and the bureaucracy. But above that, I think, are the corporations and these immensely powerful families that seem to rule the whole world and do it for their own benefit, and they care as little about us here in Canada as they care about people in Iraq. When it's our turn, they'll destroy us, and maybe that's coming quite soon because you know, this country has been under an economic attack for the past 30 or 40 years. We now have the homeless, more and more poor, our healthcare system doesn't work, and all the money that should be doing that is going up to those same people. So that's what we're up against, and that's what we have to deal with.
Even today, I was listening to Democracy Now, and there was a letter written by 40 millionaires in New York asking the American government to increase the taxes on the riches. Now that tells you two things. How, I mean, and why they are asking that? Because of the gap and because of the economic trouble happening to a lot of American family. Now, these two things that I mentioned are how the American government is so corrupt to a point that the richest class, ask that government to tax them more. And the second thing, I don't think they are really, because of their love to the rest of the American, they are saying that. They know logically that growing that gap farther and farther, in the end, could blow up in everybody's face, and they could lose everything. Could
and
be
we're
a
seeing
chaos.
it right now with the support for Donald Trump and the support for Bernie Sanders. Both of these men are really outside the party elite from both the Republican and the Democratic side.
I believe it Trump, yes, but not Sanders. I don't think Sanders really, as many people believe about him. Again, we have the gap existed. We have especially in Obama time, we have the shift of wealth to the top 1% went very fast. Somebody need to talk about that. But the issue here is not an one-person issue here. I'd never heard about Bernie Sanders before working on a movement, and he is part of it. No, he is talking here as an individual. And it's election time talk. I would never really listen to them, unless if I wanna go and laugh a little bit, I would turn on to hear some comedy, I would turn on to American election, to hear Trump crushing the other disgusting Republican candidate. I don't like Trump, he's a racist thug, obviously, but he is crushing these candidates who are worse than him in some cases, like a Cruz, who want to bring back the Bible to govern the U.S.
Yeah, I don't know anything about Cruz. It's, and I guess most people don't.
But again, coming back to Sanders, I think Sanders, it's like Obama before. Fresh face, talking about a great idea, a change we believe in. But in the end, you know, I think I prefer George Bush than Obama. George Bush represents the ugly American face in your face. Obama give you the sweet talk while under the table doing the same disgusting thing.
Okay, so are we in exactly the same situation in Canada right now? We've had Harper, now we've got Trudeau.
And I'm waiting for our Trumps because Harper represents the Bush era. Trudeau, I think, for sure represents Obama era. And after 2 or 3 years, we will have our Trump coming back.
I can hardly wait. Mazin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.